Close door. Close door so you can make noise. Thanks. Hey, everybody. Take that out of my ear. Good evening.
Hello, Rabbi.
Hello, everybody.
Hi.
Hope everybody's staying good. I do not. Hold it 1 second. Music's coming through. Hold it. Sorry. That is a lot of noise. I was on phones and different kinds of things. So hold it 1 second.
I'm loving our weather. I've been in swimming twice this week so far.
Nice. Is it clear? The air is clearer now?
Yeah.
Yeah. It definitely feels like fall down here. So it's hot, but it's not ridiculously hot. And it actually,
I don't know, 90 degrees and fall just still don't.
Yes, but what are you talking? You were living in Arizona. I know you were living in Sedona.
Well, actually, when we were living, by now it's probably in the 60s.
Yeah, where you were living, but it's
Well, not yet. Actually, it goes to October. It starts getting cool up there.
well, we had. I don't know. All I can say is that I felt a little bit like fall this week.
No, it's nice in the mornings because it is cool in the mornings.
It does have that kind of feeling like it's not going to be ridiculous today. So definitely,
It's going to get up to 100 on Sunday, though, Rabbi.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, it does that every so often on Yom Kippur, and guess what? I don't have to.
101 on Yom Kippur on Monday.
Yeah, I don't have to worry about it for a change. Honestly, I've never had a chance where I haven't had to sing and talk or do stuff while fasting. So I probably will be sleeping a lot more, which is what I do when I'll come home from services and usually take a nap for like 2 hours before Neila. This year, I won't have to worry about that. So, I mean, I may sleep even more. What I'm just saying is that it's not going to be like it is, like ever. I'll be able to do it and be wrecked.
Been a few years since that's happened, huh, Rabbi?
Been many years since and again, when I was probably in my 20s, early 20s, fasting was not as difficult either, just because you're stronger.
See, I find it well, I can't do it anymore, but I found it easier as I got older to fast than when I was younger.
I don't know. Maybe, you know what? Maybe it's been so long, I can't even remember. I just remember when I was a kid, I kind of thought it was funny, and then.
Well, someone once told me, he was a religious Jew from work I worked with. He said, eat pasta right before Kol Nidre, and it's easier to fast that way. So that's what I do. I eat pasta.
That I can't tell you, but I can tell you that it definitely does work if you don't eat too much the day before, because your stomach, expands when you've eaten a lot. When you stop eating,
Yeah, he told me eat pasta and drink lots of water.
The night before?
Yeah.
Well.
And it's worked. I've done it ever since I talked to him, and it has worked.
I will tell you, too, that people, I don't have this problem because I'm not a coffee drinker, but that's what people say is the hardest.
Oh, see, I don't drink coffee either, so the last few years.
So coffee has been a hard thing for people to, normally I hear, to give up. But it's kind of an indicator that you're drinking too much coffee. So maybe it's time to stop. If you're having such bad headaches, maybe you have a little bit more of an addiction than you should. Anyways, I will tell you, as we're getting people on, it's hard to believe. I mean, obviously, a few days we'll have Yom Kippur, but this time next week we're going to be getting ready for Sukkot already. So it's kind of weird. I mean, we'll be 2 days away from Sukkot. So.
Reb, I have a question for you. Looking at my Jewish calendar, I don't see where we actually read the last parsha of Deuteronomy.
So it's always read at Simchat Torah, right? So Simchat Torah, which this year is it's October 10th, the night of the 10th. Technically speaking, we start reading that. We read the Zot HaBracha. We read that on that day, and so it doesn't show up as it only shows up as that last chapter, that chapter 33. It doesn't show up as a separate weekend,
Right.
ever, because Simchat Torah can't be on Friday night, so it's never on a Friday night. So it can't be that day. So it's never read on just by itself. And again, once we finish it, we start over with Genesis right away. So technically, that is only the portion for Simchat Torah. The last portion's only of the Zot HaBracha is only read on that day, and
Did not know that.
it's not read. It's not read. It's not read during the week, because Sukkot always is the week before. You always on that Shabbat before Simchat Torah, you're always reading the Sukkot portion. So remember, Sukkot always goes over Shabbat and can go over two Shabbatot. Technically speaking, Sukkot can start on Friday. Actually, it does this year. Perfect example. It starts this Friday, right? So, or not this Friday, a week from Friday. So it starts on a Shabbat. And so on the way the calendar rolls out, we actually have a Sukkot reading on the first day of Rosh Hashanah. We have on that Shabbat, will be October 23rd. Oh, excuse me, October 3rd. October 3rd, yeah. October 3rd, and then we get to October 10th, and we're reading the last portion of Sukkot. We're reading the Shmini Atzeret portion for the last day, for that 8th day of Sukkot, we call Shmini Atzeret. That'll be Saturday. So that is a perfect example of reading two portions, 2 weekends that we read. The next 2 weekends, essentially, after this weekend, the next 2 weekends, the last weekend actually the first 2 weekends of October, the last week of September going into the first weekend of October, and then that first weekend after that next weekend, Sukkot. So we actually have 2 Saturdays where we read it. So the weird thing about this, and I mentioned this a long time ago, so I don't expect people to remember. Sometimes the last book of Deuteronomy, or the last part of Deuteronomy, the last chapters, even though they're only like 4 chapters, we read them over a period of like a month. And that's literally what's happening right now, in the sense that last week we read Netzavim Vayelech, the week before we read Netzavim, which is just before that. I'll put it, and it's up on the screen here. That's chapter 30. Well, we read chapter 30, 31, 30 and 31 last time. Actually, we start with it starts in chapter 29 right here. Netzavim we read not last week, because we read Rosh Hashanah. We read Netzavim before that 2 weeks ago, and then Netzavim is a double portion with Vayelech. Vayelech is only 1 chapter, chapter 31, and that's what we left off with in Deuteronomy. Then we had Rosh Hashanah portion, and then now we read Ha'azina, which is 1 chapter, and then we have 2 weeks off for Sukkot, and then we're going to read the last portion of the Zot HaBracha and Simchat Torah on that one day. So really, like a month, and we're really only reading what is the equivalent of like 3 chapters, 4 chapters. What normally would be 1 Torah portion, we read over a month. So Deuteronomy really kind of slows down. You know, it's like a slow motion ending to the book, to the Torah. So keep that in mind. Again, it's a very unusual book overall. It's different than all the other books. We said that when we started. We've seen it over the last couple of months, and it ends in a completely different way. And last week, not last week, 2 weeks ago when we read Netzavim, that was very much like the rest of Deuteronomy. Very uplifting, very powerful, lots of warnings, lots of kinds of Moses imparting, wisdom and hopes to the people. And then, again, warnings too. It's not all positive, it's some warning. And then as we get into these last portions, the last few weeks, it changes completely, which is that we're going to be going into this week, a poem or a song. And then after Sukkot, we come back and we read the last portion, the last chapter of the Bible, chapter 33, of the Torah. That is V'zot HaBracha, it's a blessing. So again, keep in mind that this is a weird way of reading Torah with lots of breaks and not a lot of text, and very unusual text in the structure and the mode that it's in. It's not narrative, and it's not anything like what we read in much of the Bible. There's examples of it, but here it's the whole portion. And then we're going to see that in Ha'azinu. So the last thing that we left off with, and again, Happy New Year to everybody. It's a good way to start the year with in the midst of Torah, and even though we're at the end of a book, we are definitely in the midst of something very important. The last words that we read in chapter 31 a couple weeks ago was Vayedaber Moshe b'oznei kol kahal Yisrael. That Moses recited the words of this poem or this song to the very end in the hearing of the whole congregation of Israel. So a couple things there. The whole thing, he sings the whole thing to them, and he sings it to everybody. So the word to the end is there, and the whole community is there too. Kol kahal, to the whole group, men, women, and children. Everybody gets to hear it. So Moses is going to sing a song or read a poem, which is, again, what this portion is. And as we've pointed out before, and maybe we'll just do this now because I won't forget to do it later. I will show you that this portion, as we've talked about in the past, every year we talk about it, it's written in a very special way. It is written as two columns. Let's show this up on the screen. And that's not a good example of it. I'm going to show a better example of it right here. Let me show. And give me a second. Here we go. Here it is. That's the way Ha'azinu looks in the Torah. So it's written out in very unusual way. It's the only place like this in the Torah where we have two columns that are written out, justified, and it's written out in definitely to set it aside so you can see that it's written in a different way, that it's written as a poem or as a song. And what do I say every year when we read this portion? I teach the one thing that, again, I'm not very into biblical codes, right? I'm not a person that spends a lot of time on the codes of the Bible, and so I don't. It's easy for people to talk about codes after the fact that something is hidden in the Bible, that there's a message hidden in the Bible. But what I always tell people every year, and this year I have very easily to show people, is we read Ha'azinu, was the Torah portion of the week of 9/11/2001. And so, as many people have pointed out before me, there's something very eerie about that being read on 9/11/2001. So, I don't want to offer up anything other than that was a fact. I can't say anything else other than that was the Twin Towers of Haazinu. So, pretty wild, right? So, again, I didn't say it means anything. I don't know what it means. I don't not claiming that I invented that or saw that first, but I will tell you that it is strange, and it is it's one of the weirder things that is in the Bible. The Bible's been written like that for thousands of years. The scribal tradition of writing out Haazinu like that is very, very old. I mean, literally thousands of years. So, let's take a look at the text. So, Haazinu is the very first word of this portion. Haazinu means give ear. Literally, it comes from the word ear. Oznaim is Hebrew for ear. And it's a very fancy way of saying listen, which of course is a phrase that we use a lot in Deuteronomy, Shema. But here it's Haazinu. And it says, as Moses is saying, Haazinu, give ear, O heavens, and let me speak. Let the earth hear the words that I utter. May my discourse come down as the rain, my speech distill as the dew, like showers on young growth, like droplets on the grass. So biblical poetry at its finest, and this is really a great example of several items in biblical poetry that I hope you can see. The first is the basic structure of biblical poetry, which is that biblical poetry is almost always a doublet, in the sense that what was in the first part of the sentence or verse is repeated in the second part of the verse. There's a clause in every line of Hebrew in the Bible, every line of the Hebrew text, there's a clause. And oftentimes, we saw it in the poem or blessing of Bilam in Numbers, which is a very long poem and example. It's in Micha Mocha in the Song of the Sea. And of course, Haazinu, which is that the first, and again, you don't always see it in the translation because the translation's trying to make things readable and understandable and flow smoothly. So you don't always see it in the translation, but they should make it a little bit easier to see. So what you have is Haazinu Hashamayim, heavens, let me speak, and listen, right? And then earth, hear the words that I utter, Vatishma. So Vatishma, the word listen, is the parallel, is the synonym to Haazinu. Hashamayim is parallel, the skies, the heavens, is paralleled with the earth. And Adabara, let me speak, or let me say something, Imre fi, the words that I utter, the words of my mouth. So you can see that there's 6 words here, but there are actually 3 words in the first verse, in the first part of the verse, and 3 words in the second part of the verse that are essentially synonyms. It's a doublet. What also is important, especially in the biblical poetry, is the use, and you see it a lot here in Haazinu, is the use of the natural world. That you see lots of allusions in biblical poetry and in songs, in Psalm, in the book of Psalms in particular, to the natural world. And so a lot of the poetry invokes and uses natural imagery. And it's one of the, it's kind of one of the great features of biblical poetry. It's one of the reasons why it's so powerful and so timeless, is that the things that are used as images in the poetry are timeless images. They're, these are things that at the very beginning we're establishing. Moses is saying, let those things that will always be here, let these things that are timeless and eternal, or as eternal as they can be without being God, let these things hear me. And so it's a really beautiful way of, again, kind of invoking those timeless elements to human existence. We look up at the sky, we look at the earth, and we're connected throughout time to it. There will be a lot of changes. There have been a lot of changes. There will be a lot of changes, but some things don't change. And so again, the next line is comparing the words that he says to rain, to dew. In Hebrew, this one line, that verse 2, actually has 4 different words for rain and different forms of water that comes from the sky, which we actually we don't have in English, which is why they come up with words like droplets, which it's like raindrops, I guess. That's a different word, but we actually run out of words for rain, because it's not, it's like the Eskimo we mentioned before. The Eskimo words for snow, that's the Jewish words for things like rain, and as we said, Jewish words for covenants or laws. Also, we have lots of different words, so much so that English, we kind of run out of ways of translating these things. This is definitely one of them. So there's, in this one verse, there's actually 4 different ideas, or 4 different images that are used for rain. Okay, so again, my words are going to come down like the rain and give sustenance. And here he goes. For the name of the Lord I proclaim, give glory to our God. And we actually use that word, Havu Godel Eloheinu. Havu Godel means give glory to God. We actually say those words when we open up the ark, and it's still a tradition to say Havu Godel Eloheinu. And even that word, even that phrase, Kisha Adonai Akra, Havu Godel Eloheinu, even those words are really kind of a doublet. Here's what he says: the rock, his deeds are perfect. Yea, all his ways are just. A faithful God, never false, true and upright is he. Children unworthy of him, that crooked, perverse generation, their baseness has played him false. Do you thus requite the Lord, O dull and witless people? Is not he the Father who created you, fashioned you, and made you endure? Not exactly, not exactly, such a nice way of speaking to the people. He's really starting off negatively with them, and there's real questions of why does Moses start and actually have a few lines in this song that seems so negative, that seems so critical of the people. And so the rabbis do kind of in the commentaries take note of it and try to explain, why is Moses so negative? And there's an interesting conclusion that they get, which maybe shouldn't seem like a surprise to you, that Moses here, when he's saying goodbye to the people, as much as he's happy that he's gotten them this far, he's really not happy that he can't take them all the way. That he is feeling very down on himself and very down on the people, because he realizes that he can't finish the job. And so what happens is that he goes through a feeling of anger and revisits these feelings of, look, you people messed it up for me. I could have gone into the promised land if you hadn't been so much of a problem. And so there's this interesting kind of, it's a reality in the song, but the rabbis point out that it really does make him out to kind of be filled with anger at the people. So, I mean, it's not all a beautiful, happy song. Let's put it that way. It's a powerful song. It's not a happy song, though. So he says to them, remember the days of old, consider the years of ages past. See again, the repetition. Ask your father, he will inform you. Your elders, they will tell you. When the Most High gave nations their homes and set the divisions of man, he fixed the boundaries of people in relation to Israel's number. For the Lord's portion is his people. Chelek Adonai. The portion of his people is Jacob. Jacob is his allotment, his inheritance, his special piece. And so God basically, according to this poem, organizes the world around Israel. That Israel's place at the center of the universe, if you will, is what's going on here. It's not just that Israel is special. It's literally like the rest of the world rotates around Israel. He found him in a desert region, in an empty, howling waste. He engirded him, watched over him, guarded him as the pupil of his eye. The phrase that's used here, that God found us in a desert region, the Eretz Midbar, in the desert region, and it says Uvatohu, in the empty howling waste, which reminds us it's the same word, Tohu Vavohu. It's the same word that's used at the beginning. So the wilderness, the desert, is compared to the chaos of the beginning of creation. So it's almost like, again, we were brought out of and created as like a new world, a new universe, the Jewish people. Now, what's interesting about this is that he didn't find us in the desert. He took us to the desert. So it's kind of an interesting retelling of this, because he didn't find us there. He brought us there. So it seems kind of like an interesting rereading of the history. But it's definitely this feeling like, to this generation he's speaking to, who've really only known the desert, the wilderness, he's telling us what happened during that time. That God literally has like protected us and made us special during this time. And specifically, like an eagle who rouses his nestlings, gliding down to his young, so did he spread his wings and bear him along on his pinions. The Lord alone did guide him, no alien God at his side. So God is compared here like an eagle. God is compared to a nesha, to an eagle. You want to say anything about that, Mike? Hello? Mike? Are you awake? Mike, he just used the eagle.
Yeah, I'm right here. Yeah, you did that. You got that. I have that up on my wall from you.
Yes. So God is compared to
I read that today, and I said, "Oh, Rabbi did that for me."
Kenesha Yair. So to an eagle. So God's compared to an eagle. It's an interesting image. It's not, again, necessarily what you'd imagine that God is compared to, but God is compared to an eagle here, like an eagle who is protecting its young, and of course can be ferocious in its protection of his young. And so again, I think the fact that the eagle is both a proud animal and one that has been in a lot of cultures used, especially the Roman Empire, obviously the United States, as a symbol of strength. What's so nice about the eagle also is that it's so protective of its young. Not that there aren't other animals that aren't, but there are some animals who, kind of let their babies alone, their cubs alone, or their young alone, but not the eagle. The eagle is with its young and with its nest. And I mean, this just people observe this about the eagle. So strong animal, a proud animal, rulers of their dominion, if you will, and yet good parents, a good example of a protector. That last phrase though is an interesting one because it says, Ein imo el nechar. God did not have an alien God at his side. Now, a lot of people, will talk about the development of theology in the Bible. At what point did the Jews believe that there was only one God? At one point did they believe that other people had other gods? That was okay, but only God that you can have is God. There are other gods, but your God is this God. Look, there are people who read it for that reason. They read the Bible just to try to figure out what the theology was at certain points. And so they look at certain verses and they say, what's going on here? Now, there is possibility that this is kind of poetic. It's a poetic way of saying that there is no other God but God. There is no other God. There was a point in time about 2,600 years ago. And again, scholars debate how many other Jews believed this, but by the time of Isaiah, definitely, during this time of Elijah and some of these other prophets, they were saying there is no other God in the universe. There's not only no other God for us, but there is no other God, period. Again, there's people who feel that earlier parts of the Bible don't reflect that they don't reflect that there's no other God. It's just that God is your God. So when the Torah says, you shall have no other God besides me, they don't take that in the sense of like, obviously there's no other God. But no, that there's no other God that you are supposed to worship. There might be another God, but you don't worship that. So that's the question that some biblical scholars have. It's not one of my big issues, and it's not something that we spend a lot of time at, because one of those kind of interesting questions of, trying to figure out what really happened 3,000 years ago. But at the end of the day, it's not really whether the Jews were all true monotheistic by 2,500 years ago or 2,800 years ago or 3,000 years ago. It's not my biggest concern, but there are people who think about that, and there is a religious element to it. I will tell you that within Christian scholarship, there was a feeling that the newer the Jews were to monotheism, the better, because that meant that I forgot to share this on Facebook. It means that we're not that much older than Christianity when it comes to our monotheism. So I will tell you, there was a little bit of that.
But Rabbi, I mean, it's obvious that Deuteronomy was written many, many, many years later. Weren't we already monotheistic back then? I mean,
well, the feeling is that we weren't, even by the time of, let's say, 2,600 years ago, that it was still like not necessarily all completely wholeheartedly monotheistic. So yeah,
really?
Yeah, it is a little bit of a problem. There are some people who feel that like true biblical monotheism didn't win out, if you will, until we came back from Babylonian exile. So
Wow.
there's a theory that, again, that most of Deuteronomy was written before the exile, but that some of it was written and added. So there are parts of Deuteronomy that were written after the exile, when the people returned. Look, I think it's an interesting question, maybe, but we really will never know. And at the end of the day, if it took 200 more years for us to get monotheistic, it's not the end of the world. I think what's amazing is that even if we weren't like truly monotheistic, by that I mean that we said we worship this God, you worship that God, whatever. I mean, we essentially have that kind of attitude today, quite frankly. I mean, we don't go around and tell our Hindu neighbors that they're worshiping too many. You may, but I never did. You're worshiping too many gods. Why are you worshiping all these idols? We don't generally do that. So, I mean, we believe in our hearts that that there's one God, but anyways, the fact is that our ancestors from a really early time, maybe even before they were truly monotheistic, had an ethical, whether they were ethically monotheistic or the other fancy word is henotheistic, if they were ethically theistic at all, was quite amazing. And I look at that more than anything else. Whether or not their beliefs of God were the same as mine today, I'm less concerned with that, with more, somehow they were able to convey that whatever their God wanted, God wanted them to be good to people and not just make sacrifices. And that's obvious from Isaiah. That's obvious from the prophet Isaiah, who lived 200 years before the exile. I mean, we think there's two Isaiahs, whatever, but even the second Isaiah was pre-exile. Anyways, so here we have this this line, God did it alone, which again, it's not monotheistic. It's definitely, God is the only God who actually has ever done anything for us. And it says, he set him atop the highlands to feast on the yield of the earth. He fed him honey from the crag and oil from the flinty rock, curd of kine, milk of flocks, with the best of lambs and rams of Bashan, which is an area in the Golan, and he goats with the very finest wheat, and foaming grape blood was your drink. Now, that's a weird phrase, right? Grape blood, but that's literally what the words dam enav mean. It means wine, but it's not just the word wine. It didn't use the word wine there. It used the word grape blood. And what's interesting is it didn't use the word yain, which is the word that it would use as a synonym. It would have used that, and it didn't. It used a very, very poetic, very beautiful word, structure, kind of the blood of grapes. Again, those are, it's paralleled with things, but it's paralleled with wheat. It's paralleled with the lambs, and then the flocks, the milk of the flocks. So it's kind of cool. It's a kind of a cool imagery of what the people got to eat at some point. Again, not the whole time they were in the desert, but at some point they're in this area. Now, it says, so Yeshurun, which is another name for Israel. Yeshurun is a nickname. What does it have as its root? Yeshurun, it is Yashar, which means straight, upright. It's a biblical, not very common, but it's used in the Bible and other places for the Jewish people. It's like Yisrael, but it's a different word. It's Yeshurun. It is a different name, but it is come down to us as a nickname, which is why we have synagogues called B'nai Jeshurun. That's a very big synagogue in New York, is B'nai Jeshurun on the Upper West Side. And there are other synagogues that are Adat Yeshurun. There's Adat Yeshurun in San Diego, an Orthodox synagogue. It's another name for us. It's another name for the Jewish people, Yeshurun. So occasionally you'll see it. It's not super common, but it's still around. It still comes there. And it says Yeshurun grew fat and kicked. You grew fat and gross and coarse. He forsook the Lord who made him and spurned the rock of his support. Now again, it really does seem like this was written at a later time, at a time when people didn't just get a little bit of food, but got a lot of food. And it does seem to be somewhat after we were out of the wilderness. Yet this poem is put in Moses' mouth, and it's put in his mouth at this point. I will tell you that it again is not uncommon in Deuteronomy to see some of these kind of anachronistic statements that seem to reflect a time later on when the Jews were very comfortable in the land of Israel, when we were enjoying our life. We've had a little bit of it so far, because as we've been coming into the land, we defeated the Amorites, Sihon and Og. So people can say, well, it kind of happened, but it doesn't seem like this really has happened as much as it did later on, hundreds of years later. And especially here, they incensed him with alien things, vexed him with abominations. They sacrificed to demons no gods, gods they had never known, new ones who came but lately, who stirred not your father's ears. Again, we read about the Israelites sacrificing and doing idolatry in the wilderness, golden calf, Baal Peor. We read about these things, but this does seem to have been going on for a long time. And the word that's used here is shadim. Those are that's translated as demons. Lo, Eloah, those are non-gods, no gods, things that are not really gods. Elohim, lo yodim, gods you don't know. Ones that are new. Kadashim, ones that are new. So again, it seems to be whole lots of things that they're doing wrong with their theology, with their worship. And again, what does that lead to? You neglected the rock that begot you. Tzur, which is the name, the word for God in Hebrew. Tzur. Tzur Yisrael, the rock of Israel. Tzur, God is our rock, and you forgot the God who brought you forth. The Lord saw and was vexed and spurned his sons and daughters. He said, I will hide my countenance. What's that word that we read before? Astira. Astira, which is setir, hestir, to hide. Doesn't mean that God left, but that God is hidden. God is hiding, and specifically, God hides his face, or here again, translated as countenance. God hides his reality that we can experience, or easier to experience, the God's face. And again, when we pray in the blessing, may God turn his face to you, right? We say, Yisa Adonai Panav. Yisa, turn, may God turn his face. Face will be turned to you, however you want to translate that. It's the opposite of astir. Astira means to hide, to turn away, to not be seen. Yisa is to see. And again, the same phrase, panai, the face. The reality of God that we experience at its best. God said, I'll hide my countenance. See how they fare in the end. For they are treacherous breed, children with no loyalty in them. So, not good. Again, not all a happy song, right? They incensed me with no gods, vexed me with their futilities. I'll incense them with a no folk, vex them with a nation of fools, which again seems to be what they become, a nation of fools. For a fire has flared in my wrath and burned to the bottom of Sheol, has consumed the earth and its increase, eaten down to the base of the hills, which is, again, God getting mad at the people. God is going to destroy everything that they can see, everything that's around them, even all the way down to the depths of Sheol, which is the netherworld, the bottom of, and again, we don't have a hell in Judaism. We don't have a description of a punishment in Sheol, but it is the place where people essentially would go when they're buried. And it's definitely down below. As you can see, when you say to the bottom of Sheol, which is again Tachtit, underneath, to the bottom of Sheol, that's like saying to the depths of hell, to the bottom. But even like today, we'd say that's a description of evil. But here it's almost a description of everything, like everything that you could experience, every square inch. But every square inch, that's going to be destroyed. So it's not good. I will sweep misfortunes on them, use up my arrows on them, wasting famine, ravaging plague, deadly pestilence, and fanged beasts will I let loose against them, with venomous creepers in the dust. Uh-huh. The sword shall deal death without, as shall terror within. The youth and maiden alike, the suckling as well as the aged. So this is again the poetry. It's not just use this imagery for happy images. These are images that are horrible images. You know, plague, famine, pestilence, animals, plague, everything, and then of course violence too. And again, for everything, for young and old, men and women and children. That's the phrase we use today: men, women, and children. Here it's men, women, or here it's young men, young women, young children, infants, and all the way up to the oldest seniors. Here we have. I might have reduced them to naught, made their memory cease among men. But for fear of the taunts of the foe, their enemies who might misjudge and say, our own hand has prevailed. None of this was wrought by the Lord. So again, this thing that we've read before, which is that God won't let us be destroyed, because then everyone will say, look what we did. We destroyed them. God doesn't want us to be destroyed because God doesn't want to look bad. If we're destroyed, then God looks bad. But here's this interesting idea that we see throughout the Bible, which is that God will not let us be destroyed because, again, it doesn't look good for God. So that was that's been God's predicament from the very beginning since we were taken out of Egypt, which is if we're destroyed, then God doesn't look good. And then it continues. For they are a folk void of sense, lacking in all discernment. Were they wise, they would think upon this, gain insight into their future. How could one have routed or two put 10,000 to flight unless their rock had sold them? The Lord had given them up. Yeah. For their rock is not like our rock, in our enemy's own estimation. The vine for them is from Sodom, from the vineyards of Gomorrah. The grapes for them are poison. A bitter growth their clusters. Their wine is the venom of asps, the pitiless poison of vipers. Now, if this sounds like a lot of poetry and a lot of songs that you heard, it is, because it's all based on it. Lo, I have put away, sealed up my storehouses, to be my vengeance, my recompense.
Oh, Charlie.
At the time that their foot falters, yea, their day of disaster is near.
Charlie.
So, what does this sound like? What song does this sound like?
Come here.
Hello? Anybody?
No idea.
No? No guesses? So, a lot of people have kind of pointed out to this to the imagery that's used in here, and to the words that are used in this part of this song in particular, which is the grapes, the imagery of the grapes. Anybody sounds familiar to anybody? No? So I'm going to get the lyrics because, again, this is used in a lot of songs before it was used in this song. But when it was first written in we don't really know when it was first written as a folk hymn, but here's the line. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord, who's trampling out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. That's the line, folks.
Mhm.
This is the grapes of wrath. I mean, this is the imagery that we had at the beginning of good grapes. Now we have really bad grapes. And what's interesting is what turns in this song or poem is the fact that our enemies, we're bad, but your enemies are even worse. And that will be what finally vindicates you, is the fact that your God will basically say, I can't let those people be in charge because they're worse than you. And that's what it says. The Lord will vindicate his people and take revenge for his servants. When he sees that their might is gone and neither bond nor free is left, he will say, where are their gods, the rock in whom they sought refuge? Who ate the fat of their offerings and drank their libation wine? Let them rise up to your help, and let them be a shield unto you. See then, that I am he. There is no God beside me. I deal death and give life. I wounded and I will heal. None can deliver from my hand. And so God basically says, when you guys learn that there are no other gods, and no other God you can offer up anything to is going to help you, then you will realize that I'm your only God. And then I will come and help you. So he says, God says, I wounded and I will heal. I deal death and I give life. Now, there's an interesting part of this portion which I want to point out. It says, see then that I'm he. There is no God beside me. That's the first part. Look, see. But this is the part. Ani amit ve'acheye. I kill, I deal death, or I will cause death. Ani amit ve'acheye. And I will give life. Now, we know, we've talked about it. We've talked about it. Nowhere in the Torah, in the 5 books, does it say that there's a heaven. Does it say that we live after we die? Except maybe here. Doesn't mean that Jews in the biblical period, early biblical period, didn't believe in an afterlife. Okay? We don't know that. I mean, it actually seems by their burial practices and kind of by what we see other places, it seems as though there was a belief that there was some existence afterwards. But the Torah doesn't specifically say it. It definitely doesn't deal with it. Doesn't give descriptions of it. But this phrase is an interesting because it says, I will cause to die, but I will also give life. And so the rabbis pointed out, and not just the rabbis, but other people even before the rabbis pointed out, and by before the rabbis, I mean, I'm almost, again, going back thousands of years, Jews were pointing out, including the Samaritans, who also don't believe in anything but the Torah in the book of Joshua. They don't even read the book of Psalms, the Samaritans. They believed in an afterlife, and they said that the afterlife was written here. Samaritans said this. And the rabbis, of course, did too. And They point to lots of things that seem to indicate an afterlife. But this phrase, I give death and I will,
Charlie.
God causes people to die and then gives them life, that must mean that there is a existence after you die. Could be poetic. It could be, it just says, I give death, but I also give life. That could have just been, another way of saying God causes people to live or die. God causes people to come into creation. But the phrasing of it, the Hebrew definitely has death coming before life, gives people this ability to look at it and say, this is about life after death. I will tell you, that's an important and interesting phrase. Lo, I raise my hand to heaven and say, as I live forever, God saying, I live forever. When I whet my flashing blade and my hand lays hold on judgment, vengeance will I wreak on my foes. Will I deal to those who reject me? I will make my arrows drunk with blood, as my sword devours flesh, blood of the slain and the captive, from the long-haired enemy chiefs. That's the words that it says, the long-haired enemy chiefs, the long-haired enemies. O nations, acclaim his people, for he will avenge the blood of his servants. Wreak vengeance on his foes and cleanse the land of his people. So, the understanding from this, of course, is that God will eventually come to the aid of, that's not a great translation, cleanse the land of his people, for his people should really obviously be he's not cleansing the land of his own people, he's cleansing the land of for the people, but he's making it inhabitable for his servants. So that is the translation, if you will, of that. Anybody have any comments or thoughts? We're almost done, but I don't want to skip it. I don't want to skip anything on this section, which again is a pretty violent a pretty violent chapter. I mean, it is. There's just no way around it. This is a pretty descriptive. I'm looking at some of the other translations here, and yeah, let me just see. Yeah, and I'll make atonement for his land and people. He'll take vengeance on his enemies and make atonement. Yeah, that is interesting. I will say that word right there, Yechiper Admato, that is the word for Kippur. It says cleanse, but it's really make atonement for, cleanse is an okay phrase, but it really is the same word we use for atonement. It's where the word Yom Kippur comes from. It's kind of interesting that word is there. Anyways, we're almost done, but we're actually done with the poem. So the last verse, chapter 43, is the last verse of the poem. And by that, I mean that if you look at it at the Torah, if you look at the way the Torah sets it up, the columns, they come to an end at this part. So there's no more columns. It goes back to writing across the, not two columns, but a single column. And it goes back to the narrative. Any other comments or comments before we finish up with the last chapter, or the last lines? And these are really some of the last lines of narrative in the entire book of Deuteronomy, because we're going to have the blessing, which is another poetic structure. It's one where in chapter 33, we have Moses giving blessings to the tribes, which, by the way, is really coincidental because we're reading about that right now in our Tuesday morning class. We're reading about Jacob blessing the people, and then we have Moses' blessing in end of Deuteronomy. So the end of Genesis, we have We have Jacob blessing his sons, which we're just finishing up and reading. And then we're actually on Wednesdays reading about Moses doing this. And the parallels between the two blessings, for those who are here on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, you get to see both sets really up close over those same time, around the same time. So it'll be fresh in your mind. It just worked out that way. We had no idea that that's where we'd be. But yeah, the next chapter is back to poetic structure until the very, very end, like this. So let's take a look at the narrative, what we know about Moses' last days. So we'll read these couple verses here. So Moses came together with Hosea, son of Nun, the other name for Joshua. His name was originally Hosea. So he has the name Yehoshua. Here's Hosea. He has a yud added to his name, one of the letters of God's name. He has a yud added to it, and it becomes Yehoshua. God will save. That's the name for it. Hosea is to save, salvation. Yehoshua will be God will save. So that is Joshua's new name. He goes from Hosea to Joshua. And so it says that Moses came together with Hosea, son of Nun, and recited all the words of this poem or this song in the hearing of the people. And again, the word shirah is either a song or a poem. Either one. We did not have another Hebrew word for song or poem. So was it sung? Did Moses sing it? It's a possibility. Most people don't like that idea that Moses sang this, so they go with poem. Okay. And then it says, when Moses finished reciting all these words to Israel, he said to them, take to heart all the words which I have warned you this day. That's really the language of Deuteronomy. Take to heart these words that I command you this day. Enjoin them upon your children. Just like Ve'ahavta. Teach them to your children, et b'nechem, ishmor v'la'asot, that they may observe faithfully all the terms of this teaching, this Torah hazot, of this teaching. So there's a Shirah and there's a Torah. And then again, this language of Deuteronomy. For this is not a trifling thing for you. It is your very life. Through it, you shall long endure on the land that you are to possess upon crossing the Jordan. So he says to him, this is not a little deal. This is your life. This is life or death. And what is life or death? For future generations, for continuity. What do we value? The fact that we will live long lives, but more importantly, that your children will live long lives and that your people will live a long life. Deuteronomy, more than anything else, teaches us to live and to live with continuity in the land of Israel. The theology of Deuteronomy is the covenant, and that the covenant is between God and the people, and that if they follow the covenant, they will live in the land. It's not about an individual person. Theology isn't about, well, I did a good thing and I deserve a good thing. Or they did a bad thing, so they deserve a bad thing to happen. This is on a macro communal level. We don't judge our rightness or goodness or evil or screwing up on an individual basis. It's what happens to us as a community, as a nation. It's a very interesting idea, and it's not one that people talk enough about, because it is considered, to some extent, it is by scholars of the Bible, it's considered a different theology. It's considered a theology that basically says, when we ask the big questions, why do we do good things, or how do we know we're rewarded, or what's the point of it all? The point of it all is not for you in particular. It's for your people, for your descendants, for your community to have stability. We don't look at it on an individual basis. Some people don't like that. Some people, that doesn't ring true to them, that doesn't feel good to them. I don't know what to tell you other than there's a reason for it. And again, if Deuteronomy was written just before or just after the exile, you could understand why it was a big deal for them, because not surviving on the land was very real, it was happening, and coming back to the land or staying on the land or returning to the land was of paramount importance. Not what happens to one individual, but what happens to the country as a whole. And again, you can make the argument that the Jewish people have been living like that for the last 70 years, which is that rather than look at what happens to one Jew in particular, let's look at what happens to the whole community. Yeah, Philip, please.
Yeah, I'm reminded, Rabbi, this is Philip Wasserman, what the astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson said. He said, stop trying to find the meaning of life, create your own meaningful life. Don't look to the universe and try to find the meaning of life. He said you're wasting your time.
Well, that's taking it to a whole nother level, which is maybe not inconsistent with Judaism, but Deuteronomy definitely wants us to think about what we can do to help our community. And again, at the time that it was written, that was of paramount importance. I mean, one can make.
I think what he was saying was what, in a way, this Torah portion is saying, which is it's not all about you.
Yeah. And I would say that, look, if we want to, if we don't feel comfortable with saying, well, it's about, and how do we, most of us who live in not in Israel, most of us who live in what you call the diaspora, one could make the argument that it's not just us as Jews or people of Israel, it's all of humanity. So I take a lot of comfort in that, but also it's of course difficult because knowing that a lot of the world doesn't live by the same values that I have or would like to have, though it's rapidly becoming that way. But to think about those things that are important to us to make sure that humanity continues, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with living a life that helps the rest of humanity. I mean, I'd like to help the Jewish people, but if I'm helping humanity, I'm okay with that too. I can feel that my life has meaning if I know that I'm helping humanity live longer and stay alive as a species. I could make the argument that that's something that I can do by the way I treat the world, the way I treat other people, the way I treat, if I'm engaged in helping to preserve life and helping to make people, treat each other better, that I'm helping in that way, and that I can find meaning in that. But I like the idea that humanity is if we're one family, that long enduring on this land isn't just the land of Israel. I mean, it says you're about to possess crossing Jordan, but by virtue of the fact that I have a home in America and my family's been here for a few generations already, that making this land that I possess, that I own property here, definitely care about the future of this country. That I think that it's pretty important to make sure that we endure in this country too. That we do everything we can to make sure that. And again, I'm not trying to get political. I'm not, and there are a lot of people on, and some like a true moderate by saying this, but there are a lot of people in all parties that are in all, political philosophies that really do have at their core the belief that let's do what we can to help make this country better, a better country for everybody. And again, there's differences of opinion on how to do that. But if we basically say that we have an obligation to do that, if we can start there, there's a lot of things we can do across party lines if we start off with that idea that how are we going to make this place better for everybody, in this country. And I take that, I take that seriously. I mean, I'm trying to do my part to make life in this country better. And along those lines, with a apolitical, with a not apolitical, but a non-political reminder. 2 weeks from now, when we're in Sukkot, normally we have a sukkah that we put up in our house. We're going to put one in our house, but we can't, unfortunately, have people over. We usually put one up at the synagogue and do services there. Can't do that like we normally do. We're going to have a virtual sukkah, like where everyone's doing virtual stuff right now, but we are going to invite people into our Temple Beth Ami virtual sukkah all week. And as of today, I can announce officially, because they've all now been confirmed, that all the candidates for the Assembly and the Senate are going to be in our Temple Beth Ami virtual sukkah the week of the 5th of that Monday through that Thursday. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and the schedule will go out in either tomorrow or Friday. The schedule will go out. We've got Kip Mueller, who's running for the Senate. He'll be here and I mean here, I mean actually on our Zoom. He'll be here on the 5th at 6 o'clock. Scott Wilk will be on the 6th. Suzette Valadares will be on the 7th. And Lucy Wlotsky will be on the 8th. So every one of those nights at 6 o'clock, obviously the 7th, we're going to finish up. All of them will finish in about 45 minutes, but that will finish by the 7 o'clock time. So we will have class on October 7th, but we'll have that's the night that Suzette is here. We'll have 6 o'clock to 7 o'clock or 6 o'clock to 6:45 time with the different politicians. So you'll have a chance to ask them questions, and you'll have a chance to talk to them and speak to them about why they're running and what's important to them. So again, all the Assembly people, or both Assembly people and both Senate people, will be in our virtual sukkah so that we can be good citizens and we can try to make our country and our community better by being engaged. So 3 of them are Republicans, because again, 2 Republicans are running against each other for the Assembly seat. And then there's a Democrat and a Republican. Kip is running against Scott for the Senate seat. So an interesting setup, and I hope you'll be there to meet these people and to ask them questions. And by the way, there are 2 Jewish connections to these candidates. Lucy, who's running for the Assembly seat, she's French Canadian, but her husband, Chaim, is Israeli. So she's married to a Jewish guy. Kip Mueller, who's running against Scott, he is Jewish. He's from Sacramento and went to Congregation B'nai Israel. I said to him, you have a very not ordinarily Jewish name, but which his father was not Jewish, but he is running for the Senate seat. So there's 2 interesting Jewish connections. If I had to bet, which I won't, I don't know that either one of those 2 are the favorite candidates right now, but it is interesting that there are some Jewish connections to the election. So we're going to finish up after that little digression, but it is important to think about, and I was going to share that at some point, is that you'll have a chance to meet these candidates. And again, I know everybody here is very engaged and will vote and will take these things seriously, but hopefully spread it around and let people know that we'll have a chance to engage these people. And it's hard to do in this crisis now too, because there aren't a lot of open forums where people can meet and talk. They're not going to be there at the same time. This isn't a debate. This is a discussion, and allows you to kind of like ask people questions and ask in a nice way. All right. So finishing up with the last verses. That very day, the Lord spoke to Moses. So this steps out of the narrative in the sense that this isn't Moses speaking to the people. This is God speaking to Moses. Ascend these heights of Abarim to Mount Nebo, which is the land of Moab, facing Jericho, and view the land of Canaan, which I am giving the Israelites as their holding. You shall die on the mountain that you are about to ascend, and shall be gathered to your kin, as your brother Aaron died on Mount Hor, and was gathered to his kin. For you broke faith with me among the Israelite people by the waters of Meribah Kadesh, in the wilderness of Zin, by failing to uphold my sanctity among the Israelite people. So again, that point where he struck the rock, where he didn't, again, according to God here, uphold the sanctity among the Israelite people. Why? Because, again, he seems to lose his temper, and maybe even more so, he makes the miracle look like it was him and not God. Or, according to some sources, the fact that he gets mad at the people and calls them rebels, which God says, I'm allowed to say they're rebels. You're not allowed to say they're rebels. I can talk to my kids that way. You can't. And so that's an interesting midrash or explanation for what Moses did that was so bad that he's not allowed to go. But again, we see this again, that Moses had a very high bar that they had to set, and couldn't break this. And again, you may view the land from a distance, but you shall not enter it. The land that I'm giving to the Israelite people, to Bnei Israel. So that is the last line in this chapter. No 10 leave Bnei Israel, that I am giving to the Israelite people. So again, the land is, you can see it, but you can't go in. So Moses is given a great miracle. According to the rabbis, he literally gets to see everything. He gets to see not just the land in front of him, but he's given a divine, magical, miraculous, extrasensory power of seeing the land. He gets to see everything, every part of the country from that place, even though he could
Rabbi,
normally. Yeah.
yes, Philip. Yeah, the other thing about the afterlife, it's kind of hard for me to believe now that we've read so much about Moses and Moses talking to God all the time and God talking to Moses all the time. It's sort of hard for me to believe that Moses dies and then goes to nothing after all that time, he spent with God. I just have to believe there's something beyond that. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. And I do believe that the Bible, even though it doesn't deal with heaven and the great beyond, if you will, it kind of took for granted that again, that there was something. But it's also interesting because the Bible recognizes that there is something special about our physical bodies. And however that next reality exists for us after we die, it's not the same as this reality. Even if we're resurrected, even if we're get our physical bodies back in some way, there's something to this life which is unique, and it's something that is special. It's not always easy, obviously, but there is something unique about it, and it's meant to be treasured, and that it may not be even the best existence, but there must be a purpose to it, and it must be something of value, and it must be something to be preserved. And again, it's kind of like a circular argument. Why is it meant to be preserved? Because it's valuable. And why is it valuable? Because it's meant, it's kind of a circular argument. But clearly there's a purpose for us to be here. And there's a reason why we're born into flesh, why we have an existence like this before we have whatever existence comes after. But you're absolutely right. This idea that Moses is a person who clearly after God, would interact with him, that he wouldn't just, that wouldn't be it. And again, part of what the Midrash says, and we read this many moons ago, years ago, when we studied this in the Midrash, that God buries Moses, right? That's alluded to here, but nobody knows where Moses is buried. We don't know the place of his tomb. There's no place we know of that this is Moses' tomb. So again, it wouldn't become a shrine.
Rabbi,
Yeah, it wouldn't
Rabbi
become,
and Phil.
yeah.
There's a book that I have that I've read. It's an excellent book by Simcha Paul Raphael. It's called Jewish Views of the Afterlife.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic book. And Phil, next time I see you, I can let you borrow it if you want.
Okay, that'd be great.
I actually got it signed, so I would need it back.
No, of course.
It is a good book. It's a one volume kind of history. And
Oh, it's incredible. I actually met the author. He came to Sedona. Really nice guy.
yeah. And so
I don't know, it just seems to me there's a lot of activity in heaven with God and angels and God talking to Moses and Moses talking to God. Just seems like there's, it's busy.
well, and the rabbis definitely feel that if Moses was communicating to God so often, it was interesting because we just read in the Midrash yesterday that the people who are in heaven are like angels. It says that they're like angels. And this idea that they're not angels, because again, they lived as human beings, so they're not angels, but they're like angels, that they attend to God. It is an interesting idea, and it's one that we think about at this time of year. It's a great place to end, which is that we believe that those who died are actually closer to God, right? And so because they're closer to God, their spirits are with God, that they can intercede on our behalf. And so one of the reasons why we pray at Yizkor, and one of the reasons why we do Kever Avot, which by the way, I'll remind people, I'll post it up on our Facebook page, but I did a Kever Avot service with Eden, which will be broadcast on Sunday. We always do it at Eden on Sundays, but this year we're broadcasting it. We put together a really nice service, really nice music, some readings. I have a little part in it, but I produced it, and I didn't want to thought it would be self-serving to have too much of me, but there's the stuff I normally do for Kever Avot. But the idea of Kever Avot, of visiting our ancestors or visiting our relatives, is to ask them to intercede on our behalf, to basically say to God, look, this guy hasn't done a great job this year, but think about what he could still do. Think about those times that he did do okay. And so the idea is that they are like angels for us, that they are advocates for us. And as much as our own actions are advocates or adversaries for us, our ancestors, and especially our parents, they have the power to put in a good word for us. And I like that idea. I like the idea that God is God will listen to them. That God will God may have that. I've always kind of liked that image that the people who've gone to the next world are there protecting me, and if they're not protecting me, that at least they're advocating for me, and that they're trying to do what they can from their place in the heavens. So I like that idea. It gives me hope and I like that imagery. So every time I lose somebody, I say, I didn't lose them. They're now helping me from a different place.
Rabbi?
Yeah.
I remember the last week that you and I were with Lee. It seemed that he was peaceful, but there were times that he was looking off to the left and up ahead and looking to another place in a peaceful, calm way. Did you notice that? Did you not?
Yeah.
And there was a peaceful calm that made me comfortable, that he was comfortable with wherever he was going.
Yeah, yeah, I hope he's advocating on my behalf too. The this idea of special people in our lives that can still be there for us, and maybe even have an advantage now from their place, is something that is comforting, especially again at this time of year. And I guess it obviously keeps them in our minds and has a way of reminding us that they're not gone, but that the place that they're advocating for us from is not even here necessarily, but in a place where it really counts. And so that's kind of an interesting idea, that where they're elevated to, and where they're, and again in the presence of God all the time, that they are, that they're there for us, and protecting and advocating for us. So, look, I hope that that's true, and I hope one day, when it's my time, that I'll have the power to advocate for those who were connected to me. So I don't know. I think that this image of Moses in his last days, the rabbis basically remind us that Moses did not want to go, even though he was 120 years old. He didn't want to go. And again, I think to some extent, as we saw, Lee didn't want to go, and he's one of the older people that I've known who's battled to the very end, and was not in a hurry to leave. And Moses, to me, and again, a lot of what I saw in Lee and what I see in Moses' story, is that he doesn't, he's still vibrant. He still wants to be here and do what he can in this world. So I think that's one of the things that's different about Jewish views of the afterlife versus what you'll hear at a church, right? Which is that he's in a better place, or that he's, we shouldn't be sad because he's gone to another place, and a better place. And to me, Judaism has such an importance on life, that clearly there's a purpose for it. Clearly there's something that we can do in this world that's important for us to do, that we're not in a hurry to get to heaven, and no, nobody should be in a hurry to get there. And at least what I saw from my own father in these last weeks was somebody who fought for life to the very end, and that should inspire us to live life to the fullest.
Yes.
And not to be in a hurry to be in that next world, even if it is a better world, because there is a purpose in this world. There has to be, because again, if there is another world, if we assume that there's another world, then there still was a reason why God put us in this world. So I don't think Judaism has an easy answer or a fully comforting answer for the fact that when somebody dies well before their time, it's painful. We don't have a good answer. I hate to say it, folks, but we don't have. I won't get up at a service for a young person and say, it's okay, they're in a better place. I can't do that. In my belief system, in my heart of hearts, in my honest answer, it's a tragedy. And every minute that somebody doesn't get to live that they should have lived, including, by the way, I mentioned this before, if somebody dies of COVID and they were in their 80s, I don't care that they were in their 80s. I mean, to me, this idea that, well, they've lived a long life and it's only affecting people in their 80s. If one person loses one day because of this disease, it's horrible. I don't like to hear people say, oh, it's okay, they're in their 80s. They lived a long life. It's not. I don't buy that. To me, it's a horrible thing. I told you, I did a funeral last week for a woman in her 80s. 2 weeks before, her husband died in his 90s from COVID. I know that these people were enjoying life and were having a good time. They didn't. It was a tragedy. I hate to say it. It's a tragedy. It's not okay that somebody died in their 90s, and so it's not such a big deal. It is a big deal.
Absolutely, Rabbi. Let me tell you a quick story, guys. I was going for long-term care. I had high blood pressure, so they needed to take blood or what have you, and I had to cancel it because my dad got sick. When I got back to Arizona, I called to make an appointment, And she said, "Oh, why did you cancel before?" And I said, "My dad passed." And she said, "Oh, how old was he?" And I said, "He was 84, almost 85." And she said, "Oh, he was an old guy. No big deal." I didn't get long-term care from that company.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm sorry. I don't,
I got an apology letter from the executive vice, I think the CEO of the company,
good.
which I threw away.
Well, they try to apologize. Listen, if you need any more, if you need any more examples of being vibrant and enjoying life, you're looking at Joyce right now. So
That's exactly it.
anybody who tells me that, they don't.
I don't know.
they
I
don't-
think
they don't
Francine has a pretty cool shirt on.
Yes.
So, I'll leave you with one thing today. Some of you, and I know Mike, because Mike is a big Dodger fan too. So there was a Vin Scully auction today. Did you know that, Mike? You heard about it?
Yeah, I know, but I can't afford any of it. I looked at it.
So
What did you get?
I got something. I didn't get anything big. I mean, the rings, the World Series rings and stuff like that went for a lot of money, like $200,000. So needless to say, I didn't get anything like that. But I did get something that was very important to me, and I was able to get it for a decent amount. I got a silver bowl that was Twins Dodger World Series from 1965. But that was the World Series that Sandy Koufax sat out for the World Series, and
Uh-huh.
I like the Twins, and it was just a great piece. And I love Vin Scully. But the reason I'm saying this is because I saw the interview with Vin Scully this last night. That's how I knew about it. He was on Fred Rogan's show. He was talking about it. I think it was with Fred Rogan. Yeah. And I was amazed at this guy. You know, he spent almost 70 years in the same job. He was amazing at that job too. Let's not forget, he was actually amazing at that job. And he's still so vibrant. And he said, you know, look, I didn't want people to get my money, you know, after I died. I wanted to, he's donating the money. So I wanted to donate the money, and I wanted to know that the money was going to the people who needed it in my lifetime. And I thought to myself, what an amazing attitude, you know, that he knew he was going to leave this money. He knew he had something of value. And thank God, I think he raised millions. I mean, I know he raised millions today because he had 4 or 5 World Series rings that he auctioned off that were $1 million between those rings. And what an amazing thing that he donated that money during his lifetime. And God willing, now hopefully he'll live another 20 years, whatever it to 120 he should live. But what an amazing guy. And he does remind me a lot of Lee, and that they are bright and great speakers and great attitude and great storytellers. And you know, we've been lucky to have a few people like that in our midst. And again, I don't know.
I think Lee had a better personality though.
Well, Lee was one of a kind, obviously, but
he had those puns that he would throw out.
I know, and obviously different. But I'm telling you, we are really lucky to have those kind of people, that like somebody like Lee that we knew well, but that we knew that we had people like this occasionally that we get to see on television and in the media. So again, we all should live to be 120 with that kind of vibrancy and that kind of life. And again, and what a important way to kind of finish off the night on our praying for life and praying for forgiveness and to have an extra moment. But let's make the most of it, folks. Let's really make the most of this year ahead, and God willing, we should have a healthy year. I'll give everyone a blessing for to be inscribed and to be sealed, as we say, Gemar Tov, that you should be inscribed in the book of life. I'm going to get back to work at giving you the best Yom Kippur experience that I could possibly do, which again, I'm going to tell you that we're going to only repeat what we have to repeat. And even when we're repeating, we're going to do different versions of the songs. There's a couple that I had so many compliments on, and they're so good that you might see 1 or 2 songs the same. But overall, I promise you, it's almost entirely different for Yom Kippur than Rosh Hashanah. And again, I wish we could have had a service like this in person. I don't know how long it'll take to get that, but in the meantime, it is definitely a labor of love, and we had a really great kids service too. The one that Wendy put together. A lot of people, and again, it's for kids, but a lot of people really enjoyed that too. So get me your photos, by the way, too. You have a few more hours. If you want to send me a photo of anybody you want me to have in the photo during the Yizkor service, we are taking advantage of the video mode. And so again, I want to thank Mike got me some pictures, Francine got me some pictures. Somebody else might have got me some pictures is on right now, but get me your pictures, send them to me, and I will include them. Ginny got me some pictures. Anybody who gets me a picture, and have it a big enough resolution so it's a good picture. Get them to me and I will include them. Okay, folks? And
Are you going to be sending out the connection again so we can tune into the videos and stuff?
yes, yes, it's the same link. It's the same link.
Some of us deleted the email from 2 weeks ago, though.
Okay, there will be another one. It will go out again. But just so you know, if you have that email, it's the same stuff.
Okay.
So
And do you have any?
There's a Yom Kippur message going out too.
And do you have any pictures of Lee, or do I have to send a picture of Lee?
Well, that's a trick question. I do have pictures of Lee. I have one right here. I mean, yeah, I don't have it on my computer, but I will get it. You don't have to. Though I will tell you, if there's one that you liked in particular, give me that one. But otherwise, I will use one of them.
Rabbi, do you have a scanner? Do you want me to? You want to send it to me?
No, I've got no. I've got it. I've got it. All right, folks. Please, again, stay healthy, stay positive as we go into these last days, and as we also say, when we get to a Tzom call, have a meaningful fast if you're fasting, and be well, everybody. And again, it's good to see you in person. Oh, remember, Jonah's story on Monday. We do that live. We're going to be reading Jonah, and it will be different because, well, we're different. We're going to be reading Jonah from the belly, as we said, the belly of the Zoom. Take care.